Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Recipe Redemption. I'm Mike Uyak. Next couple of videos that I'm going to be posting here, um, you're not going to see me eat any of them. And there's a very good reason for that. I'm an idiot. So, despite all the systems that I've put in place to prevent this from happening again, in the process of transferring the footage that I actually shot for these two videos, somehow I deleted them all permanently. And yeah, I'm annoyed. So, lucky you, I don't have to subject you to the image of me eating anything. But let's start off with a real gem of a recipe that I came across. I haven't been able to narrow down the exact date that this advertisement came out for a recipe from Nalley Foods. They were originally a Tacoma-based company here in Washington State, and they made a number of food products, and I think they were eventually bought up by Best Foods, I believe. So some of their branded products are still around, not all of them. So this recipe for egg and oyster scallop, it's going to be a treat. As with a lot of these recipes that came out around the mid 20th century, relatively simple. This was intended for the busy housewife, and it was intended to make life easier by just having a handful of ingredients and virtually no prep time. And it's a perfect example of this. Hard-boiled egg, some oysters, some Nalley's Tang salad dressing. Don't worry, it's not the orange drink. It was tangy, and I think I would have to do some research, but I think Tang was actually the orange drink was actually invented after this. Um, it's a product of NASA, so that would have been 60s. This, as far as I can tell, and I haven't actually been able to find, they don't make Nalley's Tang salad dressing anymore, nor have I been able to find a photo of the back or anything that sort of lists the ingredients list. But from what I've been able to glean, it's basically a tangier mayonnaise. Back then, people considered mayonnaise to be an acceptable salad dressing all on its own. I'm not so sure about that. Needs something a little bit more than that, but I digress. So, cream of celery soup mixed in with the mayonnaise. So, extra goopy. This is topped with either crushed Nalley's crunchies, which looks like they're just a ripoff of Cheetos. A lot of companies, once Cheetos became really popular, a lot of companies decided to come up with their own version of them. But you have a choice between crunchies and just Nalley's potato chips crumbled up on top. I'm going with the potato chips for a very specific reason. I don't know about cheese and oysters anyway, so I'm going with the potato chips. Let's just see what this looks like. As I mentioned, this is a really easy recipe. Started off with some oysters, and because they were big, I cut them in half. Hard-boiled eggs, and the recipe says to cut them into quarters. To this, I'm adding my mixture of cream of celery soup and mayonnaise. Just going to mix that up to kind of combine them a little bit better. And it is about this point when I realized that this ramekin is just not going to be big enough to allow me to mix the ingredients in it and also cook. So transfer into a larger ramekin and stir to combine. And once again, if I actually had someone else being the cameraman, I would have another set of eyes to notice that my stuff's not in frame. But what are you going to do? And then, lest we forget, the potato chips. I'm just
crumbling them up with my hands and sprinkling on top. This goes into the oven for 40 minutes.
So my version, single serving version of the egg and oyster scallop looks a lot better coming out of the oven than the advertisement because I chose to actually cover the whole top of it with the crumbled um, potato chips. So it looks better because it's actually concealing the horrors within. Speaking of the horrors within, as with a lot of these recipes, not the worst thing I've put in my mouth, but that's a low bar. um, the oyster, the commercial oysters, these big ones, um, they have a certain muddy bitterness to them that makes them more suited to things like oyster chowders, or if you're just going to, fry oysters, they're perfectly fine for that. But they have that kind of an, very oystery funk um, that doesn't pair well with a lot of things. And this is another example where uh, fancier oysters might actually benefit this recipe. They overpowered the flavor of everything. The hard boiled eggs barely contributed anything. Certainly not to the flavor. Maybe a little richness from the yolk, but each bite, um, if I didn't look down and actually see that there was egg white in it, I wouldn't know there was egg white when it because it's just the mayonnaise and cream of celery soup just they don't get any less goopy for having been baked for only 20 minutes. The oysters themselves were barely cooked in that time. um, and the chips added a little bit of saltiness, a little bit of texture because of the crunch, but not great, not great. um, But I think sort of swapping things around, it's possible to sort of fix this.
For my redemption, I have a lot of the same ingredients. Same oysters. I've diced the hard-boiled egg. I've put a dollop of the cream of celery soup in there just because. And I'm adding some spices and some lemon juice. I have a little bit of cayenne pepper, paprika, parsley, and a little bit of Old Bay seasoning and an egg. And I'm just going to, kind of scramble the egg. I probably should have done that beforehand and mix that in. In the meantime, I have my potato chips. I've blended up into more or less a meal, we'll call it, instead of a flour. And speaking of flour, add about another, I'll call it about a quarter cup, maybe a third of a cup of flour to this. And then all the wet stuff. And hopefully this will turn into a batter eventually. And I'm hoping that's enough flour to kind of bind this all together into a batter that will fry well. Speaking of which, got a pan of hot oil and just going to spoon, maybe 2 tablespoons worth of the oyster batter in, and I'm using my spoons to kind of flatten it out into a fritter. And fry for about, I gave it about 2 minutes per side until it looked like it was nice and brown.
Okay, this idea needs a little work. Um, the hard boiled egg added nothing to the structural integrity of these fritters. They tended to kind of fall apart in the oil. I need a little bit more something to bind them together, and the eggs just interfered with that. um, the oysters actually taste a lot better, and I think a lot of it is just having more flavors in there. The bright acidity of the lemon juice, the spicing, and it's actual seasoning in this thing, rather than just cream of celery soup and mayonnaise. Um, I think probably, well, both a little bit more flour and a little bit more liquid to make it more of a batter that can sort of, as it cooks and potentially cracks because it's still kind of liquidy, it's self-healing in a way. It'll fill in those cracks and continue to hold everything together as it cooks. Um, and I don't know if it was the oyster or if it was the egg, but because I didn't have the heat cranked up that high, but like 3 4 minutes into cooking, all of a sudden the fritter started to explode. And and right at the time when I was actually taking my glasses off to clean them, ironically enough, is when they really popped. I got boiling hot oil straight in my eye. So that made me very, very cranky. Now, that being said, once I was able to sort of scrape everything back together into sort of a patty, the flavor was really good. Um, I like I like fried oysters anyway, so the flavor was actually very good. The seasoning was awesome. It tamed down the oyster flavor, so it wasn't quite as muddy flavor without covering it up. But it wasn't quite as muddy. You just got that seafood flavor, and that was really nice. I think I need to tinker with it a little bit. One, to figure out how to keep it from exploding on me, because that was a little more drama than I wanted. And so it would hold together. And the taste wasn't perfect, but I think conceptually, the oyster fritter um, is definitely an upgrade and a redemption of the egg and oyster scallop recipe. Just egg and oyster scallop, don't make it. Oh, and by the way, I saw online some discussion. Um, Obviously, there are no scallops in this egg and oyster scallop. Uh, the term has kind of fallen out of use. They're talking, it's like scalloped potatoes. By definition, a scallop, in terms of a dish, is any dish that is cooked with uh, cooked with cream, um, and coated with some sort of breaded topping. So think like a gratin, like potatoes au gratin, is thought of as scalloped potatoes. That's another name for scalloped potatoes. So in this case, an egg and oyster scallop is because of the cream, being mayonnaise and cream of celery soup, and a breading topping. So that's out of the way. um, that being said, don't make it. Not great. There are other oyster bakes that have a few more ingredients, a few more fresh ingredients. Instead of cream of celery soup from a can, it's more of a cream sauce that you make, that sort of thing. Those exist, and I would be interested in trying some of them out at some point. But this specific recipe, that ain't it. The fritters were definitely better. Another idea I actually had was to try and take the crushed up um, potato chips, if you insist on using potato chips, or actual cooked mashed potato, um, mix it with flour, egg, and seasonings, and make a sort of a dough, and encase the oyster in that, and then deep fry it and make sort of a oyster potato croquette. That's another idea that I had that I didn't get around to doing. Um, Mostly because I was concerned about second-degree burns to my eye. So, yeah, that being said, enough talking. What do you think? Um, are there any other ideas that you can think of for how to redeem the egg and oyster scallop? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, like, subscribe, and comment, share with all your friends. And I'll see you next time here on Recipe Redemption.